Hello, my name is Carrie and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I hope to read during the Sealey Challenge. If you don't know, the Sealey Challenge is a month-long challenge in August, which was created by the poet Nicole Sealey, and the challenge is to read a book of poetry for every day of the month. I have been participating in this for the past few years. I love it. It has shown me a not only appreciation for poetry, but also a love and an understanding of poetry that works for me and poetry that I enjoy learning more about. But of course, this type of challenge requires a lot of poetry. So as a poetry lover and someone who reads poetry all year long, I have been working on a list of what collections I think I might want to read during this month, and I have gathered those here today. I have divided these up into groups to kind of categorize the collections and explain a little bit about why I might want to read these. So we're gonna start off with advanced reader copies of poetry collections that I need to catch up on for 2026, because these are pretty high priority for me. The first one is Be Easy by Adrian Matejka. This is a collection of new and selected works. This poet is pretty well known as an American poet. I've read some of his poems here or there, but I have wanted to read a full collection, and why not start with the newest? Next up is Maybe the Body by Asa Drake. This collection is looking at, I believe, different generations of women that are kind of in conversation with one another. Specifically, I believe negotiating Filipino-American identity across generations. I will say I do love the bunny on the cover, but it makes me wonder if this is a darker collection because the bunny looks a little bit mischievous. The next one has a gorgeous cover, and this is Dear Mothership by Marcus Wicker. This is exploring grief and public loss, while I believe also kind of talking about, the kind of world we're living in nowadays. From the description that I've seen of this, I think it is a sad book that is looking for joy, which makes a lot of sense with this cover for me. And I kind of love collections like that, so I'm hoping that this one will be one that really stands out to me. After that, I have Staying Still by Hieu, Minh, Nguyen. This is an interesting collection because it's looking at our anxieties about belonging and being a part of a group and how that kind of actually can keep us away from engaging with people because we're so anxious about what people might think of us. And I think it is also kind of this reckoning of how do we face ourselves? How do we get over our own insecurities and interact with the world? I don't feel like I've read a collection in a while that has looked at anxiety, especially in this kind of way, so I'm hoping that this will feel like something pretty fresh. The second to last one in this category is Rupture Anthem by Hera Naguib. This is about the poet's experience growing up as a young Pakistani girl in Saudi Arabia and I believe living in multiple Gulf countries before resettling in the United States. It talks a lot about I think it's the kafala system, which is a migrant worker program in the Middle East that has been a source of controversy. I think it's reflecting on that and also that experience of growing up, because I believe this was happening around the time as the American War on Terror. And so of course she's going to be grappling with this as well. And the last collection in this category is Hum by Sanam Sheriff. This is a queer trans poet that is kind of ruminating on their life and their experiences kind of living in exile from their family, their community. It also is looking at Urdu, and I believe it incorporates Urdu lyrics into some of the poems, which I don't know a lot about that language, so I'm really intrigued to see how this is done and what kind of effect it might have on a reader who doesn't have a lot of background on this. The next category are digital editions of poetry collections that I own that I would like to get to. Now, I'm gonna be so honest, I have over 100 poetry collections in terms of ebooks and audiobooks, so there were a lot to choose from. So these were specifically ones that as I was going through that I really felt interested in, and they are from very different time periods. They're not specifically new collections, although there are some new collections in here, but I just want to give a forewarning that they are a mixed bag of things, which is kind of the point though, because I don't want to be reading the same type of poetry collection during the Sealey Challenge. I enjoy reading a wider variety of topics, of authors, because obviously 31 collections can feel like you are reading the same things over and over again if you don't really try to diversify what exactly you're reading. The first one is No Rhododendron, and this is by Samyak Shertok. This poet is Tamil, which is a part of an ethnic group within Nepal. This is ruminating on the native language of the poet's family, which doesn't actually have a script. So it is, I believe, just a verbal language, and it's kind of reconciling this history through a culture that doesn't write things down. I know very little about Nepal, so I'm hoping that this will be kind of illuminating. The next one is from another beloved American poet, and this is Kevin Young's Night Watch. Kevin Young is really well known for his poetry, and this one is kind of a State of the Union from what I've heard on current life within the United States. I believe this is either a 2025 or 2026 release, and I have heard pretty good things about it, but I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much. Next up is Corazón by Yesika Salgado. I think this starts out as love poetry and then moves into the eventual dissolution of this relationship. I'm not 100% sure if that's the exact structure or if these are just breakup poems, but I've heard there's a transitional flow to this collection. And I think that this poet has put out also more poetry collections and maybe an essay or short story collection. So this is an author that I've had on my radar for a while and I would like to read something by them. After that, I have Instructions for Traveling West by Sullivan. This is about the author's experience kind of mid-COVID pandemic of, I believe, uprooting her entire life. I think she left her long-term partner or husband, moved across the country and just started over. I am a little bit hesitant for this one because I have read some poetry collections that have dealt with the COVID pandemic, and it just has been a little weird because it doesn't feel that far removed from history, which is a little insane because I know now it's 6 years ago that the initial COVID outbreak started in the US, but still there is something about reading about something you have lived through that feels very odd in this sense of I don't feel like I can connect so much to those collections because it feels like such a bizarre experience to have written down. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that in the best of ways, but that has led me to steer clear from some collections. But this one just sounds really interesting to me in terms of the huge risk that this author took in, changing all of these things in her life. The next collection is Brother Sleep by Aldo Amparán. This is a collection of poems that are about both the poet's loss of their brother and also, I believe, with violence towards queer people in Mexico. I think this is going to be a heavy read, and so I'm going to have to be a little bit careful about where I place this in terms of the collections I'm reading around it. The next collection is Every Day We Get More Illegal. This is by Juan, Felipe, Herrera, and this is a collection of poems that were written during Herrera's time traveling the United States as a poet laureate, which would have been, I think, around 2015 to 2017, if I have remembered correctly. And so these were written in all different places across the US and kind of reflecting on these experiences in different places in the US. Because of the title of this, I'm wondering if these poems are going to focus on the migrant and immigrant workers within the US that maybe the poet met during these travels, or if it's going to be more about societal political changes that are happening in the US during this time period. The next one is one of the few translated poetry collections that I've chosen for this challenge, and it is Let Us Believe in the Beginning of the Cold Season by Farrokhzad. This is translated from the Farsi by Elizabeth T. Gray. This is a very famous Iranian poet who unfortunately died relatively young. I think she was in her 30s. She was known for being a prolific Iranian writer, and this is a collection of her works across her career. So I think it starts with some of her early works and then progresses through rather than being kind of intermixed together. But I am trying to read more translated poetry this year. So this is one of the picks that I really wanted to prioritize because I've heard such amazing things about her poetry and also about Elizabeth Gray's translations. The last one in this digital category is Indian Coping Mechanisms. This is by Billy Ray Belcourt, who is from the Drift Pile Cree Nation, and this is a look at everyday life in their community and looking at kind of the generational trauma that have affected present day issues within the Indigenous community that Belcourt grew up in. I've read many of Belcourt's poems before, but I haven't read one of their collected works, so I'm really excited for this one because this year in general, I did want to read a full work by Belcourt. The next category is called Returning to Poets. These are all poets that I've read from before, and I'm really excited to read from them again. The first one is Daughter of the Mountain by Fatimah Asghar. Asghar is one of my favorite poets, and this is a collection reflecting on their complicated relationship with faith, which is something I really enjoy reading about, especially in poetry. I think Asghar is one of the few poets that I would find the most intriguing in terms of this because the way that they write, the way their poems come together are always so naturally beautiful. So I think this kind of inner, deeper reflection and vulnerability will just add to that experience with this new collection. The next one is Cloud Runner by Harjo, and this is a collection that I believe comes out in the fall of 2026. This is one that I think is going to be a difficult read, but I also am very intrigued as to how Harjo is going to present this narrative because this is her reflections on her life after her daughter died. And I think this is going to be a really hard read in that regard because many of Harjo's books have looked at her relationship with her children, her love for them, and losing a child is one of the worst things that can happen to someone. So I'm trying to reflect on where I think I would like to position this in August because I think it's one of those reads where I don't really know if Harjo is going to explore in depth the grieving process or if she's going to reflect on her child's life and her child's, continued existence in the world through Harjo's family, things like that. I'm not sure the direction that it's going in to see about, what frame of mind should I be in when I approach this. The next one is Resting Bitch Face by Taylor Bias. Bias is a poet who I was really impressed by their debut that came out a few years ago called I Done Clicked My Heels 3 Times. This is her sophomore collection, and this is a look at the kind of audience's gaze in regards to film, media, art, and how this creates this perception of Black female subjectivity. I think this one is going to be more nuanced, more technical than her first collection, which was much more personal reflections. And I'm really intrigued to see her writing in this type of structure and style that I definitely think she has the talent to pull off. After that one, I have Blessing the Boats by Lucille Clifton. Clifton is another poet that I really enjoy. And this collection is new and selected poems that are about kind of the human experience. I am assuming this will be about the African-American experience because that is definitely a theme within Clifton's writing, but I am not 100% sure, and I don't need to be because I trust Clifton to write really amazing poetry. Similarly, another poet that I have loved and would trust with any collection. This next one is Incendiary Art by Patricia Smith. I first read parts of this in The Intentions of Thunder, which was published last year for her 70th birthday. And this section of Intentions of Thunder was one that I found the most captivating. It is a reflection on the unjust violence and brutality directed towards Black men. And it is kind of Patricia Smith exercising this anger and these hopes and these dreams for Black boys and the hope that they will turn into men. I think this is definitely going to be a heavy read, so another one that I will have to kind of carefully plan out in the month. And I want to clarify, when I say I need to carefully plan out reading this through the month, this is because some poetry collections are really heavy. They are poems that obviously linger for a while and you need to sit with. And so I don't want these collections like Incendiary Art, like Cloud Runner, to be collections that I'm expecting to easily breeze through. They might be a collection where I read half in one day or half in another, or I break up the reading experience over a few days. And when there are some poetry collections that have really heavy, really dark themes, it can be really difficult, not just in the sense of continuing on with this challenge, because I don't necessarily prioritize just finishing the challenge to finish it, but it can be very heavy on your mind and your heart while reading these. And so I want to be careful about the frame of mind that I'm in when I'm approaching these works. Now that that tangent is done, I only have 2 more left in this category. The first one is Soft Science by Franny Choi. This is a collection that is reflecting on surviving in a world with so much technological advancement and what that really means for humanity. And the final collection is The Crown Ain't Worth Much by Hanif Abdurraqib. Hanif Abdurraqib is one of my favorite writers just in general, both in his nonfiction and his poetry. This is, I believe, the last poetry collection of his that I have to read before his next work is published, because I think he has a work coming out in 2027. So I can finally kind of make my way through this one so that I know I have another collection waiting for me, because I'm trying to space out his work. Now, I've already covered quite a lot of collections, but there are some that I have physical copies of from the library or my shelves that I am also hoping to get through this month, because a reminder, there are 31 days in August. So that's a lot of different books that I need to kind of plan for. The first one is New Poets of Native Nations. This is edited by Heidi Erdrich. This is a collection of Indigenous poets from all different communities, languages, I think even across different parts of North America. And it's just all types of styles that I think on anything that they wanted to write about that Heidi Erdrich collected here. So I think that this anthology will be nice because it's showing so many different styles. Similarly to that, I have another anthology called The Palestinian Wedding. This is edited and translated by A.M. El-Mazhiri. This is a collection of different Palestinian poets who were resistance poets. This one is a bilingual edition, so it's actually half of this size. So I think this will be actually relatively short. I actually have one more anthology, and this is Poems from the Edge of Extinction, edited by Chris McCabe. This is fascinating to me because this is a collection of poets from all over the world who whose languages are considered endangered. So how this works is that they have divided up into continent. Then it has a poem in the original language and the English translation. And there are all different types of translators, so I don't have like a set list for these. But then after each poem, there is a reflection on the language. So this page that's about the language, it talks about where this language is from, how many people speak it, what is this language like comprised of, because some of them are languages that have evolved and adopted things from other languages over time. It also talks about the poet themselves and kind of the history of the language, and I think also the revitalization efforts of the languages. This is a really unique collection that I think I will definitely learn a lot from. I am really excited to read something that is so focused on the art of translating and also the love and preservation of different languages. The last two books are just normal poetry collections, and the first one is On the Edge. And this is a collection by a Georgian poet called Miriam Kavaladze. And I actually purchased this about 2 years ago while I was traveling in Georgia. I found it at a bookshop and I wanted to buy something from a Georgian poet, and this collection just looked so cool. However, I cannot list this on Goodreads, which kind of sucks because I have tried multiple times to get them to add her work on there, but like the hoops you have to jump through for that, there's like so many delays in things getting done. So I have let go of any hope that I will get this on Goodreads. Nevertheless, it's still on my shelves. It's still something that I want to read from, and it's relatively short. This collection is primarily focused, I think, on this like complex relationship between science and faith, which also sounds interesting to me. So the last collection I have to talk about is another one from a poet laureate. There have been quite a few in this video, and then is Bright Dead Things by Ada Limon. This is a reflection on how we conceptualize ourselves and our identities, and I have only read Ada Limon's work, I think, in like just individual poems here or there. I haven't read a like full work of hers, so I'm hoping I will get the chance to do that this year for the Sealey Challenge. Now that concludes the giant pile of possibilities that I have for the Sealey Challenge. Now I will say, when back in the US this summer, I have some other poetry collections there. I have many other digital editions of poetry collections that I may end up gravitating towards for this challenge, but these were the ones that at this moment are intriguing me the most. I don't know that I will read all of these. That is the beauty of the Sealey Challenge, is I tend to read whatever I'm feeling in the moment. And I don't stress too much about just finishing the challenge. I want to enjoy what I'm reading. Last year, I ended up not finishing the challenge, and I was okay with that because I was still learning a lot about what I like in poetry, what poetry collections I gravitate towards, what poets I really enjoy, what types of language or structure or themes are those that are appealing to me. So this is nothing too serious. It is just about having fun and reading poetry, and I hope that this video makes some people out there want to pick up more poetry. Thank you so much for watching this video. Happy reading. Bye.